The more often you train, the fitter you will get. Sounds super obvious. I mean, why am I even making this YouTube video? And indeed, from a physiological or theoretical perspective, this completely makes sense. Each time you train, you trigger a response, being it making more muscle proteins or building more mitochondria for aerobic capacity. So the more you train, the more often you trigger that response and the faster you will improve. Well, that's the theory. In this video, I will dig deeper into some super interesting data where training frequency was manipulated, but the overall weekly training load, the stress on the body, was kept the same between groups. And then the picture becomes less obvious. Because when you control for overall training load, training more often might actually not cause more adaptation. I think this video will give you some new insights regarding your own training. So without further ado, let's go straight into it. Hi everyone, welcome back to another wod-science video. My name is Gomar, I'm a senior scientist at ETH Zurich, based in Switzerland. And for the last decade or so, I studied and taught different aspects of exercise physiology. And my goal now is to bring some of that science that I learned back to you guys. So let's start with strength training. I'm recording this video in the morning and let's pretend it didn't really happen, but let's pretend I went completely fasted to the gym this morning before the kids woke up and I did a heavy strength session. What will happen then when you remain fasted for a couple hours? You will spike an increase in muscle protein synthesis. And basically what that means is that the body is stimulated to generate or produce or translate more structural proteins in the muscle like actin and myosin to basically build more muscle mass, all right? And that process takes approximately 48 hours. So you have 48 hours of increased muscle protein synthesis after a heavy bout of resistance training. This has been shown for decades and many studies have done this with very meticulous analysis in the muscle, in humans, in mice, and so on. A large part of my PhD was actually about this process. So what happens is, okay, I don't stay fasted. I mean, I do my strength training maybe fast, but afterwards I need some food, I need some protein. And independently of the strength training, the amino acids, the proteins that you eat will also spike this muscle protein synthesis because obviously you need the building blocks. My muscles, they're made from proteins, from amino acids, specifically leucine is what will trigger this whole process. So you'll have these spikes throughout the day when you eat proteins, when you eat vegan or animal-based proteins, it doesn't really matter. So if you would repeat this throughout the week, throughout several months, you will accrete muscle mass, and that's how you get stronger and get more muscle mass, basically, right? You have this long-term increasing muscle protein synthesis, and specifically in untrained people, this is a very potent stimulus or a potent effect. Interestingly, when you get trained, when you get closer to your theoretical or physiological or biochemical ceiling of muscle mass, those spikes in muscle protein synthesis after you have eaten will become shorter and basically shorter lived as well. So it will be harder to stimulate your muscles, to stimulate the whole protein translation machinery to make more proteins, to make more actin and myosin. Makes sense, right? Because that's why you have to try to keep progressively overloading the body, having more volume, more training load to be able to always stimulate that muscle protein synthesis. And also in some cases, that's certainly in the bodybuilding world, they also try to eat more overall protein to again stimulate that muscle protein synthesis. Very well known and very well, let's say, documented over time. So people were thinking, okay, if you are trained, it is harder to stimulate your muscle protein synthesis, all right, to trigger the response, so to speak. So maybe it's better that we don't do every 72 hours or every 48 hours a strength training, but actually increase the training frequency in order to get more structural adaptations. And that is exactly what this, I think, quite a good study looked at, where they manipulated the frequency of training, but not the overall training volume. Okay, in strength training or strength trained people, call them college aged men, and as you can see here on the slide, they were pretty well trained, I have to say. So I really tried to pick a study here that used people that were decently trained. They had a 136 kilogram one arm back squat. So that's, I mean, on average for a population of 12 to 20 people, that is not a bad back squat. They did powerlifting, a total of approximately 400 kilogram, and they were, of course, actively participating in resistance training for a minimum duration of 6 months. So what did they manipulate? I think quite interestingly, they had one group that did low frequency training 3 times per week: squat, bench press, and deadlift. Typical compound movements for the body, for the powerlifting world. And then another group that trained at higher frequency, 6 times per week. But the overall amount of tonnage, amount of load they lifted was the same. For example, look at the squat on the left side. They did Monday 4 times 8, then Wednesday 4 times 5, and then 4 times 3 on Friday. And the 6 times per week group basically cut every set in half. So they did 2 times 8, 2 times 5, 2 times 3, 2 times 8, and so on, where they basically matched exactly the amount of load they trained throughout the week. And then it would be interesting to know, because these guys were already pretty well trained, you would think from the theoretical perspective that the 6 times per week would actually gain more muscle mass because they were able to trigger that muscle protein synthesis response more often. Okay, but that didn't really happen at all. It's very beautiful data. Look at the left side back squat. The green group, which is a 3 times per week, the low frequency group, they improved their back squat by approximately 12% in 6 weeks. This was a 6 weeks training study, so pretty short, by 12%. So that's a very good improvement from 137 to 154 kilograms. So a good improvement. I think this is a well set up study. And the same happened exactly for the 6 times per week group, 139 to 156. Also fat-free mass, you can see an improvement by 2 to 3% in both groups. No statistical differences, exactly the same. So many other studies have basically looked at very similar questions, slight differentiations in amount of load or frequency they were doing, but overall this picture remained the same. If you match the weekly training volume in untrained as well as trained people, frequency of training likely doesn't matter too much. Good. That is strength. I know many of you are doing some kind of strength training in your overall routine, but also we like to look at endurance training. What happens if you manipulate the training frequency in the endurance training world? Because obviously strength training specifically affects your muscle protein synthetic response, the amount of proteins you basically build and amount of muscle mass you build, very specifically to strength training. But endurance training, if I go out for a run or a football training session or anything that is more aerobic, this will be more related to gaining more mitochondria, better stroke volume, more whatever blood volume, specific adaptations. And those obviously also have different durations of adaptations. Of course, not everything happens to the same extent in the body. And then we have to look at a very, very good study from Bent Runnestad. If you ever want to look up more good practical research on strength, but specifically also endurance training and also working with high-level elite athletes, go to pubmed.com. I will put it in the post editing, and look up his name, Runnestad. He is an excellent researcher that did a lot of good work. And what he did was, again, working with elite athletes. If you I like to pick those studies because you can basically manipulate whatever you want in untrained people, they will improve. But if you want to improve something in elite athletes, that's going to be a lot more difficult and maybe better to look at. So we are looking here at elite cross-country skiers and biathletes. Of course, in Norway, they like those sports. A VO2 max of 67.8 or 68 to round it out. So that's a good VO2 max. And that's important. They trained approximately 650 hours per year. So you can recalculate that, how much that is per week, but that's a decent amount of training. And basically they did a little bit the same as a previous study. They had interval training on top of their normal training. I will get to that in a second. Where one group did the low frequency group that did 1 times 8 by 8, so 64 minutes of intervals. So that's a decent amount of volume, much more than, for example, many of you who are doing CrossFit or High Rocks are actually doing. But anyway, so 8 times 8 at 85% of their maximal heart rate, and then also 6 times 12. So a decent amount of interval sessions. And then the other group did exactly the same load, but 2 times 4 times 8 or 2 times 3 times 12. So again, you cut the amount of sets in half and you just do it every other day. So overall, the training volume and the training intensity was exactly the same. Good idea to do this, in my opinion. Important caveat or important note, this was on top of their regular training volume. These guys didn't only do interval training. No, the predominant amount of training was some strength training and certainly also a lot of zone 1, even some zone 2 training, so low intensity work. And then they added this low or high frequency interval training on top of that. And when you look at the data, they have a lot of data in the paper. Again, I will put it in the show notes. But one of the tests they did was an 8 kilometers uphill roller skiing time trial. So basically a time trial on roller skis going as hard as possible. And this dashed diagonal line that you see here in the graph means that if the pre and the post time or testing time would be identical. Okay, and everything below that, so the open squares, that means that the post tests were better than the pre-testing. So they improved their roller skiing time trial performance. And you see actually, very interestingly, that, okay, it's a very low amount of athletes. Of course, because we're looking at absolute elite athletes, it's not easy to have 20, 30 people per group. We're looking here at 6 to 10 people per group. But you see on the LF group, so that's the low frequency group, that they actually statistically improved more. So they trained less or less amount, less frequency, but they improved, or more people improved compared to the high frequency group, where only 4 out of 6 improved compared to, I think, 8 out of 10. And that was not statistically significant in the high frequency group. So whatever you want to manipulate the statistics, there was no clear benefit, again, of training at higher frequency. Quite on the contrary, actually. Good. So that does, at least to me, change a little bit my mind of, okay, you have to get more training sessions in per week. That's how you get better. Not necessarily. And this likely has also something to do with recovery and being able to absorb all that training volume, because those guys were training, of course, a lot. Then I hear you thinking, okay, this is strength, this is endurance, but what about mixed modal sports, for example, functional fitness, CrossFit, and High Rocks? And of course, unfortunately, we have zero data about this. There's no intervention studies that have been manipulating training frequency. So what do we do with wod-science? We basically design a study ourselves, because now 11 weeks ago, we started exactly this. So we started our master's project, where we invited people from the wod-science community. Some maybe are actually watching this and are participating in this study, but if you have missed this, we basically did the same thing. We had one group that did the high frequency group, so they trained 6 times per week, and another group trains 3 times per week only. Okay, but the overall training load is the same between groups. And as I said, they started now almost, I think, 8 weeks ago, and they're in the final testing weeks at this moment when I am recording this video, mid-April 2026. So I will be able to analyze the data next week and be able to provide you some more insights on this exact question in 1 to 2 weeks. I'm super excited for this one. So that's also a reason why you have to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of those videos, because I get these kind of emails quite a lot. I will just quickly read it out loud. Hi, I am a CrossFit athlete. I'm quite interested about your way of training, because I'm now on another program. I'm of course not going to mention that program, where we do huge volume and lots of different types of endurance. And I'm not sure, when I checked your program, the programs that we have for functional fitness, also Hyrox. It's only one Metcon. It depends, of course, on the training phase, as well as one run and one zone 2 session. So likely much less overall volume compared to other maybe well-known programs, but we believe that the quality of training, certainly in mixed modal sports, is super important. And that's why we also designed this study to understand, okay, does it actually give you a benefit to do lower amount of training load per session, but more frequency, compared to higher amount of training load per session, but lower frequency. And of course, one of the difficult things to do with such a study in more mixed modal sports is to, okay, how do we know exactly which or how the amount of training load we give per training group? So that's why we keep track of every modality, CrossFit or strength or endurance or lifting, and we provide a training load per session so we can match the training load for each group throughout the weeks with progressive overloads and so on. So that's also how we build our other programs. If you're interested in seeing how we structure our training plans, how we think you will get the best or the best training to reach your goal in the most efficient way, just scan the QR code that is popping up right now. We have training plans for Hyrox, specifically for building your endurance, building your speed and power at the stations, but also for functional fitness, CrossFit in a more hybrid style or a more competitive style where we increase the overall training load to get you in the best shape for your next competition. I'm 100% sure you will get super fit by getting a little bit more structure in your training, and you definitely also support the page, support the channel, and keep all the external sponsors away. Thank you for that. Good. To finish, let's go to our original question. Does training more often make you fitter? And you can look at it from two ways, right? The first one is, okay, if you are close to the maximal amount of training or training volume you can do per week, given your recovery, given you have family, given you have work, then I don't think it is better to increase your total training frequency. I mean, all the studies I've just shown and also I've read in the background do not show any advantage of training more often at a lower load or lower training load per session. Good. So that's important. So it's maybe better to train a little bit less, but maybe longer or harder in that session. Most of the data shows that that is likely the better approach. But some people, maybe also you watching, want to improve the overall training load. You actually want to get more stress on the body. Then I think training frequency, training more often, is an excellent tool to accomplish that, to get more training load in your body. For example, I picked up playing football again since last August, and initially I could maybe only do one hard training session of football and then once running and maybe one CrossFit session per week. That's what my body could tolerate, right? But I actually want to improve more in football, so I try to keep the amount of training the same related to CrossFit, strength, and more aerobic endurance, but I try to add one more football session every 2 months or so I can up the total training load using frequency. So it depends on your goal, it depends on the amount of time you have, but overall it's clearly not the case that just training more frequently will make you fitter, make you stronger, and make you more aerobically adapted. Cool. If you found some value in this video, don't hesitate to go down. It takes only 2 seconds of your time, and like and also subscribe to the channel. We are growing fast, so thank you very much for that. If you want to learn more about the geeky stuff, the science on fitness, nutrition, strength, functional fitness as well, don't hesitate to click the video that is popping up right now. Thank you for watching. Always a pleasure to share this information with you, and see you in the next one.